Since 1999, Dubuque has experienced a significant number of flood events. This flooding has led to 6 presidential disaster declarations and an estimated $70 million in damages to public and private property in the downtown and North End neighborhoods. In response, the City of Dubuque has issued the B Branch Watershed Flood Mitigation Project. This multi-phase project consists of several infrastructure improvements that, when combined, will mitigate flooding, improve water quality, and enhance the quality of life within the B Branch watershed. I'm Kristen Hill, Communications Specialist for the B Branch Project, and I'm joined today by members of the city's engineering department, Darren Meering and John Dienst. Today they will tell us about the phases of the project that are under construction in 2019, including the B Branch Creek Railroad Culverts project and storm sewer capacity improvements on Kauffman Avenue. Thank you for joining me today, Darren.
Sure.
I want to start with the B Branch Creek Railroad Culverts project. This is the kind of final piece of the creek restoration project. Can you tell us what the project entails?
Well, in a broader scope, it's completing, the B Branch Creek restoration. Previously, we completed what we consider the lower downstream section, the open water area that's kind of by where the former Dubuque Pack was, out near 16th Street. And then more recently in 2017, we completed the upper section, kind of north of Garfield up to 24th Street. So this project is connecting the two, right at Garfield down to the lower section through the railroad tracks. And so really what it involves is adding more culverts under the railroad tracks, and so that's mainly what this entails.
Okay. And why is that so important? What are these culverts going to be doing?
Well, right now, we've increased the conveyance. We've provided place for stormwater to move through this part of our community, and without upsizing what goes under the railroad tracks, it's kind of like a dam, or it's a restriction, and so it really limits the effectiveness of what we've done already today. And so right now we can talk in terms of level of protection. Like for example, we'd say right now that what's provided today here in early 2019 is a 75-year level of protection, meaning it can handle the vast majority of stormwater management needs, but the rare events that we've had, beginning in 1999, and where we had a series of 6 that would have even overwhelmed, what we have here today to some level. And so what we're going to provide will provide a 500-year level of protection to the community.
Okay, wow. So how many culverts are going in?
So the existing are, there's 2 box culverts that have been there since about 1930. Railroad placed those culverts, and up until now, that was their property and their duty to maintain and operate. We're going to be adding 6 additional culverts, 6 8-foot diameter culverts next to those. And the ones that we're going to be adding are also going to be lower, so that they'll be able to be more efficient to drain the water than there is today.
Okay. Now, I have heard that they're going to be using a method called micro-tunneling to put these culverts in underneath the railroad. Can you tell us, how does that method work?
So just in terms of tunneling, the main benefit of that is that you don't have to disturb what's on the surface. So what the construction will look like is they will construct a couple of pits, of boring pits they'll call it, and one end they will insert pipe, and then they will tunnel underneath, and then the other side of the railroad tracks they will have the receiving pit where they'll push the cutting head will go all the way underneath, and then they'll eventually extract that. But the process of micro tunneling is that there's actually a machine that goes into the ground that has a cutter on the front, and it actually will kind of cut the soil and earth, and then it'll kind of feed that soil back through the pipes and through the process back to the surface, and then it has a separating unit, and then but that way there's no voids, so what's left behind is the actual pipe itself. So it's a complete, once that pipe is pulled, there's nothing left to do, versus your typical construction, you're digging a hole, and then you're putting some bedding down, and then you're putting the pipe down, and then you're adding layers of backfill until you get back to the surface, and then you have your surface restoration. So in this case, once the pipe is installed, you're pretty much just button up what's on either end, and you're done.
Okay.
So there's other work we have to do in terms of extending the box culvert that we put under Garfield Avenue as part of the upper B branch construction project. And what we're really doing is extending those culverts. We'll have what we call a junction chamber, a transition structure buried where stormwater will come from the upper section. It'll come from other storm sewers, flow into these culverts, which will channel them, underground under the railroad tracks to the lower section. And then there'll be an outlet, work on the outlet side of the pipes where the water will discharge into the lower section or downstream section of the creek.
Okay, so water is coming into that transition structure from both the upper B branch and then another storm sewer as well.
Right, correct. Yeah, the other one is what we previously referred to as the B branch storm sewer. So part of that was removed when we did the upper B branch, but then there's still some sections that remain of this limestone sewer that served still a lot of the north end. And for example, the 22nd Street storm sewer that John's going to be talking about, that this water will actually come through the former B branch storm sewer and join the transition structure at this location.
So the water from there will also be going underneath the railroad tracks here and out to the lower B branch.
Right.
Okay. So when will they start construction? When will they begin microtunneling, or is there prep work they need to do beforehand?
Yeah, there's a lot of prep work. We're dealing with the Canadian Pacific Railroad, and one of the things is that a railroad is a very unique operation in that, if we take out 10 feet of track in Dubuque, it can affect hundreds and thousands of miles of train traffic throughout the Midwest. And so they have special protections to make sure that, whatever we do, we take care. And so that's actually one of the reasons why tunneling became such an attractive option, because the railroad will be able to operate as normal, like we're not even there during our entire project. Right. So, that's a pretty unique situation when it comes to a construction project. As part of this process, they actually were very hands-on as far as reviewing plans and our specifications, what the contract will be for our contractors, so the rules and how they're going to perform their work. The railroad had a significant hand in helping to draft that contract and the requirements. And as part of that, our contractor will have to send in the shoring plan, which means how is this contractor going to make sure that the soil doesn't collapse? Obviously the railroad is going to be concerned. They don't want anything happen to their tracks while we're doing this operation. And so that's did watering plan, as far as drawing the groundwater table down so that when they're working in these trenches that they're free of water. Mm-hmm. But obviously, depending on how you draw water down, it can settle different surrounding areas, and so the railroad will have wants to review that and things like that. So that's part of the process, is that the contractor here in early 2019 is getting that information, that documentation, those plans together. Mm-hmm. And they'll submit those both to the city and then to the railroad for review and approval. Okay. And that's going to take a few months here in early 2019. And then there's just waiting for the pipe. I mean, this is a 8-foot diameter steel pipe that's just not on the shelf somewhere. They have to manufacture it specifically for our project. And so that there's a few month lead time for that before they actually start the tunneling process. But they will start doing some work. They will be mobilizing here in early or mid-April 2019, putting up fence, just establishing the construction site, moving a construction trailer on site, and just kind of getting ready. Even though the tunneling might not start until June or so, there's the box culvert that they're extending, that they can start working on that, and some other underground stuff that's kind of a little farther away from the railroad tracks. They can work more on that type of a part of the improvements. But
okay, so it sounds like we could probably start seeing a few things happening maybe in April.
Right, April 2019 was when you'll see it.
And so you said it's like a 8-foot diameter culvert, mm-hmm. So that'll be something, seeing that come down the road and be delivered, right?
Right, yeah.
So will there be impacts to traffic with those type of deliveries and any of the other work?
The only impacts I think that people will see is a little bit on Garfield Avenue. There'll be some deliveries there. There might be lane closures for short periods, but that's really the only traffic, or that people will have a obvious kind of indication of what's going on. I mean, the noise that the microtunneling process itself is very quiet. It's underground, so it's not something that someone's going to even know that's taking place. When they install the pits that on either side, they will probably, a lot of times they will hammer in the metal sheets,
Okay.
and that can be a bang, bang, but that's only a couple of weeks of work there on either one, and then that'll be done. But other than that, it's just maybe just your normal heavy equipment, such as dump trucks with maybe some soil, bringing soil to or from the site, or some backhoes or some excavators might be on site, but even those aren't typically loud.
That's great. So maybe just a couple lane closures on Garfield Avenue, but other
Right.
than that, maybe not too many impacts to residents.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So during a rain event, how will the View Branch Creek function differently than it does today?
Okay. So, I already talked about just the levels of protection, but I also mentioned that our culverts that we're adding are lower than what's there today. So what that means is when it does rain today and in early 2019 and the past, is that the water has a harder time, getting out of the upper section, between Garfield and 22nd and 24th Street. So that area ponds up more frequently today than it will when we're done. Water will be able to more efficiently make its way through the railroad tracks into the lower section when our project is done. So, in short, today it ponds up more frequently and higher than it will when we're done with our culverts project.
Right. And when is it expected to be finished?
So the culverts themselves under the railroad tracks, the plan is to get those done by the end of this calendar year, by the end of 2019. But then there's a lot of other work on the upstream side and downstream side of those. As I mentioned, the transition structure and the box culverts. So we expect it to be a full 2-year project. Now maybe only final landscaping will be in the spring of 2021, but right now the contract says they have until the end of June of 21 to get everything done. So.
Okay. So also part of the project, they've discussed putting in a bike hike path, like a tunnel underneath the railroad tracks. Can you tell us more about that and whether or not that is something being considered?
Sure. Well, when we had originally went into the design of this project, that was one of the things that citizens, one of the things that they would like to see as another way to kind of cross those railroad tracks. Because right now they have, 16th Street or Bangler, and those aren't very close together. And so we had talked with the railroad, and they were, as part of our easement agreements with the railroad, we are able to utilize the existing box culverts as both stormwater and for a hike bike path. And so our design allows for that to happen. The grading will be done, the retaining walls will be done. So what you'll see is that from Garfield Avenue, you'll start at the sidewalk, and then you'll see an area that'll be graded down to slowly, gradually get down to where these box culverts are that are currently buried. But there'll be retaining walls added. Right now, so that'll be done on both sides. So in essence, it'll accommodate a hike bike path. The project currently, the contract we currently have does not include construction of the hike bike path.
Okay.
We're hoping that, depending on how the contingency funds are needed, and the contingency funds are whenever we award a project, we always set aside some money for unforeseen things that might come up that you need to do to make the project a success.
Sure.
You can design something forever and try to think of everything, but you just can't. Things just come up. So, but in a project of this magnitude, the contingency's almost $2 million, and so if things go well and we thought of everything, then at the end of the project, or we might have some money to actually complete that hike bike path.
Yeah.
And we're also looking for, we're always continue to look for grant funding that would fund a trail like that. So, and it's very competitive normally.
Yeah, that would be great. So it sounds like
Yeah.
hopefully there's contingency to get that bike path done,
Right.
or maybe some grant funding in
Right.
the future.
Yep.
That would be great. So I've heard of another bike trail that is supposed to be going in, and that is one that goes around the 16th Street detention basin down at the lower B branch and then connecting over to 12th Street. Can you tell us a little bit about that project as well?
Sure. So the bike path that we have today runs through the length of the upper section of the restored B Branch Creek, and then it kind of ends there in Garfield, and then there's a trail that was built with the lower section of the B Branch that goes up to the railroad tracks. And so getting into the railroad tracks, those culverts, connecting those two would then deliver people from, the Heritage Trail that goes all the way to Dyersville, through the B Branch project, under the railroad tracks to 16th Street. And so what this project you're talking about now is, it'll be done in a few phases.
Okay.
The first phase will be funded in this July. The first money is available, July of 2019. And that phase is going to take a bike path that will go from kind of the intersection of Sycamore and 16th Street. It'll go underneath the Highway 151, 61 overpass on the kind of the south side. And then it'll go kind of next to the Alliant solar field, the new Alliant solar field, over to 12th Street. So that's funded and to be constructed in the summer and fall of 2019. And then the next phase is a couple years out. That'll add a trail along 12th Street out to Kerper Boulevard. And then the final phase, as I understand it, is, again, another 2 years out from that, and that'll connect 12th Street kind of along Highway 151, 61 towards the Millwork District.
Okay.
So that's all in the 5-year plan, and the first segment is going to be funded this year. So
That's great. It sounds like there's a kind of a long-term plan to have a really
Right.
nice connected trail system there.
Yep.
Great. So the other thing I wanted to ask you about was down at 16th Street and Elm Street, there is the former Bloom Company Scrapyard and Recycling Facility, and the city received, I believe, 3 EPA Brownfields cleanup grants to clean up that site, and it sounds like there will be some work happening in 2019. Can you tell us what is going to be happening in that area?
So the Bloom site, as we call it, there are actually 2 sites separated by the railroad tracks that runs between. So their site runs between 15th and 16th, between Elm and I guess what was Cedar Street. And on the east side, there's 3 buildings that are still there. The 2 that are closest to 15th Street, those will be coming down here in early 2019. Then the 3rd green building will leave in kind of the interim. Leisure Services and the Parks Department will be using that as kind of a temporary maintenance facility. But ultimately, the west side, or the side on Elm Street that borders Elm Street, will be redeveloped as a facility for the city of Dubuque that, it's going to serve multiple functions.
Okay.
At a minimum, it's going to provide a permanent maintenance facility for all the work that we've been doing down there, the flood control maintenance facility that the Leisure Services Department is in charge of kind of maintaining, making sure that it operates as intended. And so right now that we're kind of going through the cleanup phase. So the west side, we're dealing with environmental issues with the building, and the main building, which is on 15th Street. And so that involves asbestos removal or those types of, environmental hazards.
Okay.
So that'll be taking place this year. There'll also be some investigations with regard to the soil. There have been some done just around the general yard, but to kind of better refine where contaminants are versus, where they aren't, and also just better characterizing their nature so we can better understand what to do with them. So, people really won't see a lot taking place necessarily, because the fence that's there now is going to remain for a while until we do get the environmental issues kind of at least addressed, so that it's not you know, poses any risk to citizens. I mean, for example, if the fences were gone, we wouldn't want people just walking through there because there is some issues with the soil that we want to take care of and make sure we don't or basically eliminate that risk. So that's kind of what's going to happen on that site during this year in 2019.
So it sounds like a couple building removals and maybe some asbestos work and other kind of soil testing, it sounds
Right.
like.
Yep. Correct.
Great. Thank you, Darren. I appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us today. And next, I will be interviewing John Dienst, who will tell us about the 2 B Branch related storm sewer improvements happening in 2019, including work on 17th Street and Kauffman Avenue. And as we welcome John, we'll just take a minute to take a look at some aerial video of the location of the railroad culverts project. Hi, John.
Hi.
Thanks for joining me.
Well, it's my pleasure.
We are here today to talk about the storm sewer improvements that are happening on 17th Street and Kauffman Avenue this year. And both of those projects actually started last year in 2018.
Right.
And so we're kind of building on the work that was done last year, this year. But can you review what the improvements are and how they fit into the overall B Branch Watershed flood mitigation project and why they are so important?
So these are stormwater projects that are resiliency projects that are part of the overall plan for flood mitigation. They're primarily conveyance improvements. So what we have currently are pipes that were designed a long time ago for essentially a 5 or 10 year storm back in the day. You know, as Darren mentioned, you know, a lot of these were over 100 years old. They were designed somewhere back in 1910, 1920 in that regard, as far as some of the pipe work that goes up Kauffman Avenue, goes up 17th Street. Old stone arches, stone sewer for the most part. Some improvements done since that era to try to help with some conveyance, but we've been having obviously a lot of flooding issues, especially on both these corridors, 22nd Street especially. I think it's not a surprise when you see people on social media kind of posting the flooding that might occur at Central and Kauffman and at 17th Street as well, and it looks like a river and that kind of thing. So these are conveyance projects. So they're large storm sewer, lots of intakes to try to take the water and put it all in the pipe. And so instead of the pipe conveying that 5-year storm, we're looking to have the pipe convey the 25-year storm, and the street to convey within the curb lines and you know, at curb height or less up to the 100-year event.
Okay.
And so that is a major improvement.
Yes.
Pipes that are 2.5 to 3 times larger than it's currently there. And as you would understand, that with pipes that size, which are 10 by 6 boxes on box culvert on Kauffman and 22nd, 10 by 5 box on 17th, leading up to West Locust ultimately. the entire street gets reconstructed at
Sure.
that point. And so what we did last year is we worked on both 17th Street and on 22nd Street. And 17th Street, what we had installed was all the underground infrastructure went in the ground. We did the storm sewer, sanitary, water main, new intakes, new fiber optic lines, new traffic signal conduits, new street light conduits, and that was done on 17th and really prepped for this spring, which the work that we have currently going on in spring of 2019 is the final surface for the pavement on 17th Street, as well as all the sidewalk work and some curb work as well. So on Kauffman, or on 22nd Street, that project, the first phase of that project was completed late in the year in 2018, fighting the snowflakes and getting stuff done. But we did get all the curb and all the pavement done, all the sidewalks installed up to just beyond White Street to the west of White. The work that we have planned this year will be to continue on from that point, and working again with the same contractor, Ports and Construction, for this project, and continuing on up to up Kauffman Avenue, across Central Avenue, up Kauffman, and hope to, this phase will stop just short of Main Street.
Okay. All right. So on 17th Street, you said they had some final paving and some
Right.
curb and gutter work to do. So
Yep.
tell us, what will the impacts be to residents?
Well, they're going to have to, as they go to install the sidewalks and do some of the conduit work that's remaining, there's a little bit of conduit work left for streetlights. They're going to be closing a couple of blocks of 17th Street at a time to kind of get all that walk in and get some of the trees planted, because the 17th Street gets some trees planted as well.
Oh, great.
And some restoration work and the seeding and all that work needs to happen. Trying to do that a couple blocks at a time, trying to maximize access for the residents as best we can. So all the north-south streets, Elm, Jackson, Washington, White, they'll all be open.
Okay.
It's just a matter of allowing us to having a work zone on 17th Street so they can have their skid steers and their equipment moving around to get all the sidewalks in. So
remind us again, I believe they're starting at Elm Street, correct?
starting at Elm Street and working west, right? So they're going to have, like I said, a couple of blocks closed, from Elm up to Jackson, get all that work in, and then they'll just kind of leapfrog and continue on up the street.
Okay. Up until Hebe, right?
Up until Hebe.
Okay.
So the final surface of the final driving surface on Central is in place at the intersection of 17th and Central, and also at White and 17th. They're just be working on new ADA ramps and sidewalk connections. This is all federal funded. Anytime any of our funding really through the city, we look at ADA, make sure we have full accessibility to make sure that people can get around.
Okay, so have they started that construction already yet this spring?
They have. They are currently working on a lot of the conduit work and starting to take out the old sidewalks, because we left a lot of those in place over winter just to give people the ability to get around during the winter. So now they're starting to grade and everything, get everything graded for the new walks and new ramps and all of the amenities that go with that.
All right. So how long do we expect construction to take on 17th Street in 2019?
They're expected to, contractually, they're supposed to be done by about mid-June, though the contractor's motivated. I think they got other work, other places. They want to be done by probably the end of May.
Okay.
So.
Now let's move on to the 22nd Street and Kauffman Avenue Storm Sewer Project. So that project started at the end of April 2018, and like you said, they were fighting the snowflakes,
Right.
and they worked up until, December even, I
Right.
think. And
Yep.
so, and you talked about some of the improvements they made. So what was the project area last year?
Last year they worked from Elm to just west of White Street.
Okay.
Was their work zone, and the reason why we did that is because we knew on 17th Street we were crossing Central Avenue.
Right. Yeah.
And we were not going to cross Central with both projects in the same year, because as most residents, they're a little bit of consternation already about closing that major artery. So we're trying to phase work to try to maximize access. So we did one project 1 year, and we're going to do Kauffman 22nd this year.
Sure. Okay, so I believe they've started on 22nd Street already this year too.
Right now, they just have started here, and they're working on exposing the termination point, the temporary structure that they installed last fall to connect to the old sewer, removing that, and then they'll start to lay box and start to get that formed up and poured. It's a poured in place box, and they pour about 40 feet or so at a time, and construct it with rebar, and so it's a very durable, strong box. And so they're starting on that work. From a schedule standpoint for people, of course, the big question is crossing Central Avenue.
Right, that was going to be my next
Yeah,
question.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're anticipating starting around May 1st to cross Central, and then it'll be about a 2-month closure at that location. And I know that it is inconvenient. We recognize that it is inconvenient. We have put in the contract that they have a maximum of 8 weeks to close that, and then restore it, pave it, get everything, all the amenities done in that area, and get it back open for traffic. Short time frame. They have a lot of work. They have a lot of underground utilities to fight. They're dealing with major fiber optic lines that run up and down Central Avenue that feed out toward John Deere and some of the other major employers in the city.
Okay.
And so we're trying to coordinate, have certain time frames set up for that crossing to make sure that everybody's talking to each other and getting that work done. So.
Great.
So there's that. That work will take, again, 8 weeks. We do have the major truck detours are following kind of we notify the DOT, and the DOT has approved our closure schedule. So most of the major truck traffic will be routed onto the Northwest Arterial around over to US 20 Dodge Street, and come back up and connect up and continue on their way to follow the kind of that 52 route.
Okay.
The local detour, and this would be cars, delivery vehicles if they're having to make a delivery in the area, will follow down Central Avenue and jog, I think at 24th over to Jackson, one direction, and come back at 21st. So we'll have, it's two-way traffic in this location, so we're going to take one direction kind of going up White Street, another direction coming down Jackson. So we're not running all the traffic on one street versus the other. Again, we're trying to be mindful of the extra traffic and the residents in the area.
Yeah. And so how far, you said they're going just short of North Main, it sounds like this year?
Right, yeah. They're going to go beyond Francis Street and come up short of North Main. And the intent is in the plans that we have kind of an overall plan design all the way to Kane.
Oh, okay.
And so we're trying to do this in phases. The reason why we would stop at that point is because we've got some major storm sewer intakes that we would be installing at that location.
Okay.
So we get those, they need to be installed anyway. And so they would be set up, and we have the structure ready to go for the next phase when funding's available. And we're hopeful that we'll get additional funding to continue on our march up the corridor.
So when do you expect construction in 2019 to be finished on Kauffman?
Kauffman will go all year. It'll go until probably late November. Okay. We have been meeting with residents pretty much one-on-one up through the corridor, having conversations with all the neighboring businesses, as well as talking to residents one-on-one. We have these design meetings. We kind of talk to them, step out in the front yard, talk about how we're going to impact the front yard, where the sidewalk's going to go. And as we've been doing that, we've been talking to people and saying, okay, we expect to be in your area around this time frame.
Sure.
Or that time frame. So depending on where you are in the corridor, it's a little bit different time. And as we're working our way up the street, we want to kind of open up behind us. And try to open access up behind us, and so that it is going to be, it's a tight corridor. Everybody knows it kind of winds and whatnot down Kauffman Avenue, but we'll try to do our best to minimize the inconvenience as best we can. One of the trickiest areas is where we go by Hebe Street, because Hebe's a dead-end street, right behind Meineke and that Fast Mart gas station up there near Central. And so the contractor, we have written on the contract, they must provide access to them at all times to get in and out, not only for the residents, but for any possible emergency vehicle
Yeah, of course.
that needs to get up there. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so on 17th Street, you kind of buttoned things up for the winter, and then you had
Right.
additional work to do the following spring.
Right.
Now, on Kauffman Avenue, you said they'd be working, pretty much all year into the snow flurries again, possibly. Is this going to be all of construction will be finished,
Yeah,
or
the
they're
intent
going to
is
have
to
to
have,
button that up?
the intent is to have it all complete by the end of the year.
Okay.
The only thing that could potentially leak or go into the following year is, how is seeding. So, I mean, we're going to seed it, okay, but it may be dormant seeding late in the year. So we'll just have to watch and see how grass pops in the spring,
Sure.
and make sure if you need to come back and have the contractor take care of that, then they'll take care of it.
All right. Now, you talked about how there was kind of a long-term plan, hoping that you could go all the way up Kauffman to Kane Street.
Right.
Now, on 17th Street, we've gone as far as Hebe Street.
Right.
Are there plans to go further?
Well,
on
we
17th?
have, we've been working with IW and Strand, the kind of consultants, local consultants that we've been working with, similar consultant, the same group that we've been working on through the whole B Branch project in general. And we are intending to have everything designed on 22nd up through Kane, and we're expecting to have everything designed on 17th Street up to about Kirkwood. Depending how funding comes, and it's one of those things where we may be told that, here you go, you've got this much, and you need to just keep moving. We have a deadline of June of 2021 for the federal funding that we'll be using the HUD National Disaster Resiliency Funding. That's our kind of a drop dead date for that funding.
Okay.
At least if we need for that. This doesn't seem to come through, or we don't get any additional funding, we'll at least have those improvements designed, so then we can go ahead and prioritize through the city council process through our budget.
All right. Well, thank you, John, for joining me today.
Sure.
Sounds like you will be very busy in 2019
Absolutely.
with construction.
Please be patient, everybody.
Yes, we
You
will.
get it.
All right, before closing, I think it's worth noting that the City of Dubuque and the contractors are working with residents and business owners as much as possible to accommodate access to their properties during construction. John mentioned they're keeping Hebe Street open during construction, and also they've been having one-on-one design meetings with property owners and businesses. But if you do have any specific questions about how either of the projects John and I talked about will impact you, then we invite you to call the City of Dubuque Engineering Department at 563-690-6068, or to visit us online at cityofdubuque.org/bbranch. And I just once again want to thank my guests today, Darren and John, and thank you for watching City Channel Dubuque.